All right. We're going to be having them speak alphabetically: Lynn, Austin, Carl Richard, and then Sammy Wyatt. Thank you.
I finally get paid back for getting to sit in the front of the class for all these years. Alan, Lynn, Austin, so I was the first one. So I always had to sit in the front of the class because the teacher made me sit there. So now it pays off. I get to speak first. I don't really have to tell you a lot about myself because most of you know me. I've lived in South Bossier for 38 years. And it's strange when you serve 38 years in public service. There's a lot of people that think, well, that's part of the good old boy system. Well, let me tell you, when I went to work in 1970, everybody else was the good old boys. And we were the newcomers and the people that cleaned up the Bossier Strip. If you look at Bossier 38 years ago and look at Bossier today, you'll see two different cities. Because when we went to work for the police department, we had 40 employees, 200 and something now. But Doug Payne's here, he worked with me. He knows what happened. And we took care of the Bossier Strip and we cleaned Bossier City up. So if that's part of the good old boys, I'm proud to be part of the good old boys that cleaned Bossier up. And it's really strange that when I grew up in Shreveport, my parents would not let me come to Bossier City. Forbid me to come across the bridge. And when my boys grew up in Bossier, I wouldn't let them go to Shreveport. They wanted to go to the duck pond. I said, no way, Jose, you're not going to Shreveport. You need to stay over here because it's safe. Not only is it safe, what Scott said about our taxes, 21.9 mills of property tax, 45 mills of property tax in the city of Shreveport. And so I think we have a lot to be proud of. I'm proud of Johnny Wyatt. If not for Johnny Wyatt's death, I wouldn't be here. And so one of these days I'm going to tell him that I'm mad at him because I never expected to be this exposed. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns, but never the target and never the one that took the dart. So y'all shoot away at me. Just do me a favor and leave my family and friends out of it. You can shoot at me all you want to. I'm tough. I mean, if you serve as police chief for 4 years and as a CAO for 5.5 years, you get thick skin. And so I'm willing to answer any question that any of you have. And I want to tell you about my experience. I went to work for the police department in 1970. At the time I was going to Northwestern State University. I was a junior in college. And I just felt like that I needed to go back. I was putting such a financial strain on my family to send me to school. I went to James Cathy and told him I wanted a part-time job just to work to get enough money to go back to school. He said, if you ever start working here, you'll never quit. Because he said it gets in your blood. And it really does. When you start policing, it gets in your blood. And it got in my blood. And probably the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to me is when the mayor put me in the police department for 2 months. I actually worked several places. When I was CAO, I was head of utilities for a while, I was head of recreation for a while, I was head of fleet services for a while, and then I went to the police department for 2 months. Like I said, the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to me, because it got back in my blood. I just about got rid of it. But I had the urge to serve as a law enforcement officer, and I love the police department, I love Bossier City, I love South Bossier. If you'll notice, a lot of our politicians don't stay in South Bossier. I'm going to stay in South Bossier. I'll die in South Bossier because I love South Bossier. I'll be happy when they get the Parkway though, because I do like to shop in Bossier. I hate to have to go over to Lowe's in Shreveport, but it's almost necessary. And what Scott said about the Swan Lake Road, we've been working on that for a number of years. That's going to take that congestion off of Airline. It's going to go all the way to Crouch Road. It's going to help that development. And if you go now in North Bossier, you don't see much difference between Bossier and Benton because of those subdivisions. People go, well, why don't you annex those subdivisions? Well, the reason we don't is because we have to provide fire and police service to those. And when you put a new fire station out there and you equip that fire station and buy a $500,000 fire engine, you do not collect enough property taxes to pay for that. But back to the marshal's office. I do not intend to change anything because I don't know what goes on there right now. I haven't been in there. There's one thing that I will change, and you'll read about that, and it's a change that I can do. It's something that I can do. It's something out of public service that I'm going to do, because I'm not going to the marshal's office for the money. I mean, I could go home and retire tomorrow, and that's where I'd be if Johnny hadn't died. But I'm going to the marshal's office, and I'll metaphorically tell you the way I see it. Johnny rode his horse back to the marshal's office, and he didn't make it back, and he fell off his horse. And his horse was in the pasture. and I got a call to come get that horse. So I went and I got that horse and put the saddle back on it. I rode that horse back to the barn, dried that horse off, I fed that horse, put him in that stall and watered him. And that's what I see my job as the marshal is, to complete what Johnny started and to continue the Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. That's something near and dear to me, because when I worked in the police department, I worked 5 years in the juvenile division. I put 2 high-profile pedophiles in jail. And if I said their name, y'all would know who they are. You already know. But I worked on one case for 5 years. That everybody loved and adored this person. But I knew better, because I'd heard too many stories about it, and I knew the profiles of pedophiles. And I knew every one of them were the same. So it took me 5 years to get this person, but I did. And the other one happened to be a school teacher, and I worked for the school system, and I worked that case when I worked there. So I know about working the Internet Crimes Against Children. I know about what pedophiles are, I know their profiles. The other thing that I'd like to do, and I don't know whether we have the funds to do it or not, and you have to understand about the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, it's not just a marshal's operation. Johnny bought and paid for the computers to start this program. Through the Attorney General's office, they decided to house it in the marshal's office. But in addition to that, there's about 7 other agencies that take part in this. And they give their time and their people, because somebody asked me about jurisdictional boundaries. We don't have a problem with jurisdictional boundaries because the FBI is involved. The Attorney General's office is involved. The DeSoto Parish Sheriff's Department, the Caddo Sheriff's Department, the Bossier Sheriff's Department, the Bossier City Police Department. And they'll go work a case in there, and if it turns out to be one of these other jurisdictions, they'll pick it up from there. But I would like to expand that to make Internet crimes against the elderly, because there's so much of that going on now. I've always said that for every good thing that happens, there's always an equal and opposing thing. You know, there's a good and an evil in the world. And for all the good that the Internet has done, and it's done a lot of good and brought a lot of information to people, let me tell you, on the other side of that, there's just as much bad that goes on. And somebody's got to police that. This is not a duplication of services. Nobody else is doing this. As far as I know, the marshal's office is the only one that does this, and they don't do it unassisted. I worked for 22 years on the Northwest Law Enforcement Board of Directors. We distribute money through the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement in the amount of grants to different law enforcement agencies. And I'm sure that we can get grants to cover things like this. It's just never been approached to get a grant. But I know how to write grants. I wrote all the grants for all the hurricanes. The Katrina, Rita, Gustav, and the tornado. I wrote every one of those grants, and I'm still servicing those grants because I'm the project manager on all of them. When they were housed in we worked 24 on, 20 off. Johnny and I really got to be good friends when we had all of the people here from South Louisiana. And what we had were critical transportation needs people. And let me tell you, it was really nasty. They would have tore our sentry tail up if we really hadn't policed it. But luckily, having connections with the school board, I just called Danny Dyson, the school board. I said, can you bring me 8 school buses? He goes, yeah, what for? I said, well, we want to take some people back home because it was over. They needed to go home. So he brought me 8 school buses, and I made an announcement on the loudspeaker. I said, anybody that wants to go back to Lake Charles, we have transportation available for you. So boy, they started lining up. I mean, they lined up. They were like 10 deep. They went out and saw those yellow school buses, and they went, we're not going. Police officer walks out and goes, you're going. And so we put them on the school bus. They wanted air conditioning. They wanted all the comforts. They didn't get that. But we cleaned the sentry tail out, Johnny and I did, in 3 days. Because, you know, when Hurricane Katrina and Rita hit right after that, we got another influx of people. We had 8,000 people down there. My job every night was to go by and count every one of them. And I wanted to make sure that we had close to that number. We probably lost some that stayed here. But I didn't want them here. I wanted them out of here. They were not like us. Trust me. I would go at night when I was counting and say, why don't y'all pick up and clean up around your place here? And they'd go, you know, we're refugees. You wait on us, you pick it up. And that's the things that we dealt with. And that's how Johnny and I got to be good friends. Working 24 on, 24 off. He'd go, what went on? Same old thing. You know, it was tough. But I believe in what Johnny did. I believe in the people he has working for him. I know all of them. Every single one of them came to me. They endorsed me. I didn't ask them for it. They came to me and asked me to run. I had no intentions of running ever for any political office. And David will tell you, it's tough. It's tough to put yourself out there as a dartboard. And I have great admiration for anybody who's willing to do that. I just want to tell you that take all the shots you want to at me. Ask me any question you want, and I'll tell you the truth. Ask me the question, and I'll tell you the truth. I have done nothing wrong ethically. Anybody that thinks I have, go to the ethics board. I have not. In my 22 years in the police department, I never lost a civil case in court. And when I was police chief, I got sued 21 times. I got sued for everything everybody did. And that's a scary feeling to go up there and stand before a federal judge in court. Never lost a case. Had one that went to the Supreme Court. So I'm not afraid of courtrooms. I'm not afraid of people. So I've got pretty thick skin, but some of my family doesn't. And that's why I'm glad my boys don't live here, because they're pretty thin-skinned, I guess. That's what happens. I made one of them a doctor and one of them a lawyer because I need both. And I told my son to marry a psychiatrist because I knew I was going to need her. So anyway, that's my story. And I'll be glad to be back in that room. I'll answer any questions that any of you have. I just want you to remember one thing, that I am a very conservative Republican. I have nothing against anyone. I will never speak evil of these two candidates. Sammy Wyatt's been a friend of mine a long time. I just met Carl. I don't know him. I knew his daddy very well. Fine man. These are fine gentlemen. And I will never say anything bad about them, ever. And I'll run a clean campaign. That I promise to you. If you don't see me do that, come to my house. My phone number is on that push card. Not an office number, that's my home phone number. It's always been listed. I've always taken calls from anyone at any time about anything. And I think I've done pretty good for South Bossier. When I lived in Shady Grove, Judy, I did a pretty good job down there. And the reason I moved to South Bossier, to be honest with you, I checked the crime reports. South Bossier was the safest place in Bossier City to live. We had fewer crimes than anyone. And that's why I moved to South Bossier. And I've been here 38 years, and we still have the lowest crime rate. And that's thanks to our great police department, who I support 100%, and our police chief. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate y'all. Come back and ask me any questions you want.
You're just too tall. Okay, here we go. Next on the agenda is Carl Reed.